This is Derrick Broze with the Conscious Resistance Network. Today I'm talking with a presidential candidate, a well-known businessman, founder of the McAfee Antivirus, Mr. John McAfee. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine today, sir. How about yourself?
We're doing good. Thank you for checking in with us. I know you're busy. You just recently made your announcement and your run for president. But before we get into that, I want to talk to you first, just to give you an opportunity to let the audience who may be unfamiliar with you, might not have seen your YouTube video, your well-known YouTube video, or some of your other activities during your illustrious career. So please, if you can, just let us know a bit about your background and who you are, and then we'll get into the presidential run.
All right. My background has always been out of the box, so to speak. I dropped out of graduate school to learn programming at General Electric, working on process automation computers, and that was probably the greatest thing I've ever done. I immediately started tattooing myself. I'm not sure why. As I was going through school and my early years of education in software, I took more drugs than you could ever carry, I can promise you. And all kinds, you name it. I took every psychedelic, K, marijuana, every mushroom, peyote button, smack. I was, I cared less. So for some reason, I was able to function for a period of time while doing that. It was not until I was 35 that it all came home that I could not continue to function in such a fashion. Joined Alcoholics Anonymous and continued my life. Other things of interest, people are interested in my experiences in Belize. I thought I had retired. I had built a number of companies at McAfee, sold that for $8 billion. I was one of the founders of Zone Labs. We sold that for $400 million to Checkpoint. Found Tribal Voice, where we had the first instant messaging system, first voice over the internet. We were just too early for our time. Sold that for a measly $17 million. But I've generally succeeded in everything that I've done. I went to Belize and bought fishing boats and started a few entrepreneurial things, just simple things. A boat charter service for San Pedro, a coffee company, a tobacco company. I was doing research on quorum sensing, which is the new approach to antibiotics, and was doing very well when one day the government came in and said they wanted $2 million for a donation for their next election. And I said, no, thank you. They had offered me all kinds of things in exchange, land along the river, women, you name it, tax breaks, but none of it made sense to me, and it didn't seem like a good deal, so I said no. The following week, a contingent of 42 armed riot guards stormed my property, shot my dog before my eyes, tortured me for almost 20 hours, destroyed $500,000 worth of my property, including my lab, terrorized everyone on the compound, and then left. No charges. The following day, the gentleman who originally came to me said, gosh, we're really very sorry that happened. That was such a mistake. By the way, have you reconsidered your donation? And I told him to get the F off my property, and that began my war with Belize, which ended with them murdering my neighbor, and then coming to me for questioning. Now, in Belize, questioning is, and much of Central America, where you are strung up by your heels. They put a football helmet on your head, and then they beat the football helmet with a baseball bat until your brains just turn to mush. It leaves no scars or marks. A very painful experience. I didn't choose to undergo that sort of questioning. I came back to the States. I've offered to answer questions in any neutral country, and they have declined. So that's my story there.
Yeah, that's definitely something people have been talking about. I'm sure I saw in the CNN interview they brought that issue up, and one of the reasons we wanted to talk with you is because we know that you seem to be of the mindset that you should just speak your mind. You know, it's a brilliantly genuine and seemingly unique idea in American politics to just speak your mind and speak the truth. And I mean, I doubt we would ever hear any of the other presidential candidates admit to using all the drugs that you just did and still try to maintain some sense of a career. But also, Americans seem to find the honesty refreshing and direct. And I think that's also what's probably needed, not just in American politics, but in America in general. So I wanted to get your ideas and opinions on a few different issues. I actually posted on Facebook to sort of take a poll and see what people would be interested in getting your opinion on, to know where you stand. We understand, I saw that you said your campaign slogan is privacy, freedom, and technology. And we've heard you speak out about NSA surveillance and spying. And, you know, I saw you also talking about the Internet of Things and just how connected technology is becoming and how quickly it's getting into our lives and monitoring our lives. So we know where you stand on those issues, which I think are vastly important, especially in, you know, the years following Edward Snowden's revelations. But I want to talk to you about a few different things that I haven't heard your comments on, that I guess the people who might consider voting for you are curious to see where you stand on these issues. These are sort of their litmus test of their presidential candidates. So if you will humor us, I'd like to go through these topics. First, where do you stand? What is your opinion of the Federal Reserve?
I think my opinion of every federal agency is it is overburdened, overly staffed, and not performing any function that it used to function before. The Federal Reserve, I think, serves no useful purpose in the course of life. We're talking about electronic coins, electronic monetary systems, and they will come. Many of them are anonymous. They will test the mettle of every government. But I think the Federal Reserve has outlived its purpose.
If you were elected president, would you try to audit or abolish the Federal Reserve? Would you be interested in that?
Well, I have too many priorities first. My first order of business would be to pardon everyone in prison for a marijuana offense. If it's simple marijuana ingestion or use or sale, nonviolent, then I'm pardoning everyone. That may take me a little while because there are tens of thousands of marijuana users in jail serving 25-year sentences for having a single joint, as you're all aware.
Would you stick to simply pardoning nonviolent criminal or prisoners for cannabis, or would you also consider that for all drug users who did nothing other than ingest a chosen substance?
Well, I think with the rest it's a little trickier because I'll explain this. But let me tell you, second, I would lobby for laws to make the ingestion of any chemical substance or the application of any chemical substance to our person, if it is self-ingested or self-implied, that can't be more than a misdemeanor. I mean, if a person is addicted to heroin, that person is carrying a horrendous punishment already. What good was additional punishment to? And people might go, well, why not completely delegalize? I think a misdemeanor is a reasonable compromise. It's spitting on the street. If it's a traffic offense, you'll pay $300 at most. Most misdemeanor crimes are around $25. If we can't do a fine, then really you're expecting too much too soon. The manufacture of drugs, if drugs are manufactured overseas, that's the problem of the country manufacturing the drugs, not us. And we are not to interfere. We are not the policemen of the world anymore. And we do not have the resources to continue to play it. People talk about loaning money to Israel and paying off Iran and on and on. We can't do these things because we're broke. This is a fact. In the real world, which is where I live and you live, If your bank is busted and your friend comes and says, I need to borrow $20, you say, I can't. When that happens in a government, the government says, all right, well, then we'll print some. In that act of printing, what happens? All of the dollars that you have worked for have been devalued and no longer buy the same amount.
Absolutely.
So we cannot spend money we do not have. This is a fact of life. And we have real problems here with crime. Human trafficking, rape and murder, molestations and violence. Children are shot in the streets. Don't we need those spaces and jails for those people? So
absolutely, let's save the prisons for the people who are actually violent criminals causing trouble in society. I want to get your comments on a couple other domestic issues that you just mentioned there before we cover the international, because you also mentioned Israel, which is a big topic. But first, you're talking about human trafficking and things that we have to deal with at home instead of chasing terrorism around the world and being the world police. What are your thoughts on student loan debt and the interest rates, increasing interest rates that is just piling this massive debt that some say is a bubble waiting to burst, and in a very real manner is just dragging down students and people who've gotten out of college and trying to pursue their careers who are just barely surviving, trying to pay off those debts. What are your thoughts on that situation?
Well, I had a student loan, and for me it was one of the best things to be able to have a loan that I did not have to pay off until after I got out of school at a very low interest. Is an incentive for education. We have to have that. What we have to have are rational principles and interests and rational payback options. What can the kid afford? Look at the society that you're in the present moment. Is it a good economy or a bad economy? When the kid gets out of school, will there be a chance to make a decent job? I don't know. We don't know until it actually happens. So we have to have flexibility.
Yeah, flexibility, absolutely. Did you happen to keep up with, I know obviously you keep up with Edward Snowden, about those revelations and that huge story. Did you happen to follow the Silk Road trial, Ross Ulbricht?
I did, unfortunately.
What are your thoughts on that? I was there to, reporting
that was a tragedy. That was a tragedy too, and he also, I will pardon.
Ross Ulbricht will be pardoned under the people under your administration.
Well, yeah, because the president can pardon anybody. That's one of the beauties. I don't need to get Congress's approval. So, because I think the law was massively misapplied, and what he did was massively understood. If you build, by that right, everybody who runs Smith and Wesson and Colt and all the other gun manufacturers should be arrested because of what people do with them.
Yeah.
We can't have entrepreneurism and have the entrepreneur be the policeman. We can have entrepreneurism, and here's what we've handed. Now you go off and fix it. We make cars that go more than 75 miles an hour. Well, the car companies are not required to put policemen on the highway. No, the cities and states and towns do that, if that's a concern to the cities, states, and towns. So no,
absolutely.
I will pardon him.
Well, that's great news because myself and plenty of others, as I said, I was there the whole time for the trial and was there for the sentencing and helped out with some of the fundraising and just in general a big supporter of the Silk Road, with the idea of what that represented, like you said, entrepreneurship and the threat that it represented to the government's monopoly. I know that's a big issue for lots of people. I also want to let's move now to a couple of international topics. You mentioned Israel and Iran and things like giving money to these other nations. For a large portion of the voting population, Israel is a really divisive issue because there's definitely those, and I'll include myself in this category, who look at a lot of the actions of Israel and the treatment of Palestinians and see human rights violations, and not only just Israel, but the American government as well, And then there's this mentality that exists in America where we're supposed to just support Israel regardless, and America continues to fund and support Israel and all their actions, and also along with that support nations and kingdoms like Saudi Arabia, who are lashing journalists for reporting on controversial topics, beheading people, crucifying people, and yet the American government doesn't bat an eye, and both Bush and the Obamas kiss the hands of the Saudi royalty. So in both these situations with Israel and Saudi Arabia, we see these really egregious actions taking place, and the United States remaining silent on them, and then continuing to partner with and fund them and do business with them. What are your thoughts on those situations and those two nations?
Okay, let me say two things. I think, number one, America must back off from being the policeman of the world. Fire on no one. We're in debt, and we have to struggle with our own economy. If we're not attacked, then we will let the world be at peace. If we have no money, I don't care whether it's right or wrong, for a specific instance to help someone, we cannot do it. We have to accept the facts that we're $18 trillion in debt, and we cannot go on. And we can say, if Israel is a friend, we'd love to help you out, but we're broke, dude. Why don't you lend us some money? Seriously, when you run a business, you're running a business, and you can't pay your salaries, what happens? Do you go out and rob?
Go broke.
No. Pardon?
I said you go broke.
You go broke. You can't pay your employees, no matter how much they want. And you cannot pay for your friends' checks at dinner, no matter how much you want. We have to back up. We're $18 trillion in debt. We're the poorest nation on the planet. If people come to us for money, that has to stop. We need to make ourselves solvent. Then with cash in the bank, and only with cash in the bank, no more of this manufacturing cash, we will pay. Because when we manufacture cash, everybody's hard-earned money devaluates. That's the way it works. So we have to get some sanity. We can't have any friends anymore that we can help out, not until we become solvent.
So you're definitely supporting a non-interventionist policy, and removing, like you said, this country's in debt, one of the poorest, largest superpowers in the nation, and we got to stop giving out money and take care of our own nation. How would you handle ISIS? How would you handle this growing Islamic State? For one, I do want to mention, and I'm not sure how well researched you are in this area. I know that you are a well-researched guy, though, that we've had more than enough documentation, even just this past week, a document from WikiLeaks confirming what many of us have been seeing for at least a year now, that the United States has directly funded these rebels in Syria and other nations, which led to the creation of what is now known as the Islamic State, or ISIS. And there's airstrike campaigns, there's talks of troops on the ground. It's just a spreading conflict. How would you approach that situation as president?
Well, I'm even beyond Edward Snowden. I believe that terrorism itself is a direct result of the interference of America in foreign states. Now, if we had not interfered in every Muslim state in this union for one reason or another, which we thought was good, do you think there would be terrorists today focused on America? They wouldn't even know who we were. Bunch of strange people living, paying no mind to anybody over here in America. No, terrorism is a direct result of foreign interference in foreign states, because you develop a hatred for that person who has the bigger guns and the bigger bombs, who comes in and tells you what to do in the name of democracy. Well, I'm not sure democracy is meant for everybody. I'm sorry. There are some countries who've been around for 5,000 years, and they've settled in their ways. We've been around for 250.
Yeah, I absolutely agree that you're correct, that the United States and the NATO nations are responsible for the creation of this terrorism. As you said, without going in there and interfering with these nations, then they likely would have no reason to come hate the West, or to spread their terror or whatever it is that they're doing in these nations. But now we have created this storm known as ISIS, and the United States is determined to deal with it. But many people, many good, geopolitical analysts have said that if we were to pull our resources out of there, and of course, for one, to stop funding them, to stop funding these moderate rebels in Syria and other nations, then we might actually see ISIS's power shrink away, and they would wither away, and those nations themselves could handle the rest and could subdue that threat. But that's not what we have now. So I appreciate your insight on that. One other issue internationally that I wanted to ask you about before we bring it back to some domestic things is that there's been a lot of news about the migrant refugee crisis going on across Europe, and there's a few different perspectives people are taking on that, whether it's opposing any immigration or welcoming them with open arms. What are your thoughts on not only that situation, but in the bigger picture on borders themselves and the idea of open borders or borders even existing in a nation? Are borders important? Do they serve a purpose? And your insight on that European crisis?
Well, I was growing up when John Lennon wrote Imagine. And played it. You probably have even heard the song and played it over and over. I think one of his beginning lines is, "Imagine there's no country. It's easy if you try." But beyond my psychedelic experience, I think America was founded on open borders. Bring us your cold, you're hungry, your workers. The problem we have is our neighbors speak foreign languages and have radically different cultures than us now. What I would like to see is take all of the money that we're spending building walls and all of the money we're spending patrolling the borders, which is billions of dollars. Get rid of the wall, get rid of the patrolling, and create a bunch of schools that teach English and a few other simple subjects of get a craft, get a job, and then document them and require that they be real citizens. I have a whole plan. One of my plans is to stimulate business through government help without costing us anything. And after a couple of years, if those businesses are succeeding, these are entrepreneurial businesses, we'll take two of the immigrants to this business and say, "No, you got to help. You have to hire them, pay them wages, and continue on unless they totally fuck up. If they fuck up, after a few times of fucking up, we're just going to send you home because clearly you don't want to learn." But we have to do something. We cannot just close our borders forever. It made the Chinese very strange as a society and very hated by the Huns and everyone else. So I don't believe in closing borders. I believe in opening borders. I came over as an immigrant. I was born in England. My father's an American serviceman, which is why why I can run for president here in America. He came over first, and I came over 2 years later. Without open immigration, I wouldn't be in this country, and God knows what would have happened to me.
Absolutely. So let's look back at the American political scene right now. I wanted to ask you, we've heard in your CNN interview what you had to say about Donald Trump. You said that he may know more than any of the other candidates how to run the nation simply because he's a businessman. But you also made a good point, which was very happy to hear, that he's still playing the Democratic Republican Party game. So he's still beholden to those parties by playing within that, and you're choosing to go outside of that. I'd like to get your comments on two other presidential candidates that they're polling reasonably well, and they also have some really strong support base across the country. First, I'd like to get your opinion on the campaign and the ideas of Bernie Sanders.
I haven't followed the other candidates a lot, and I don't want to say anything about someone who's a negative. Which I may say by accident, by not knowing enough about them. So, to be frank, the only two candidates I've looked at are Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump.
Thoughts on Hillary Clinton?
Pardon?
Your thoughts on Hillary Clinton, then?
Well, here's the problem I have with both Donald. I mean, Donald is an outstanding entrepreneur, and he's made thousands of jobs for America. I think he ought to go back and do that. Donald has never written an email, and he's stepping into an office where his competitors, his antagonists around the world, like the vice premier of China, is a computer programmer and knows as much about cybersecurity as any technologist in the country. The same thing with Russia. They would not hire someone who's not cyber aware. Yet, and for someone like Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton and Hillary Clinton believes that wiping a hard disk is taking a damp rag and wiping it. Seriously. So the Chinese would consider that illiterate. And it would be like us electing a president who could not read nor write, but would hire advisors to explain words to him. So it's going to be okay, you can vote for me. Now that's insane, and I wouldn't vote for him. So both of them are completely illiterate in the science that holds this culture and this society and this economy together. That's cyber science.
No, I absolutely agree that both of those candidates, I would consider them to be illiterate. And I know you said you haven't really looked into much of the candidates, and specifically Bernie Sanders, but I did want to tell you just a couple of his ideas. And from your perspective, with everything you've laid out about non-intervention and foreign nations and focusing on the debt and really hitting that hard, how do you think that would be addressed in a situation where someone like Bernie Sanders says he wants to give free college tuition, he wants to give free health care, he wants to raise the minimum wage up to $15 an hour, and make really big changes in the economy and with the employment sector? What are your thoughts on that? And is that viable in our current situation? And could it be with the changes that you have in mind?
No, I don't think it could be. Keep in mind, you have to accept. There's no doubt. You see the numbers, everyone. We are $6 trillion in debt. Trillion. 6 trillion. Now, we can't afford to spend more money than we don't have, and we don't have enough to spend money for those programs. We have got to cut the government drastically. TSA has to go in its entirety. What I intend to do is continue to pay the people's salaries because that's only $2 billion a year. But the total budget is $8 billion a year. So by just shutting it down and continuing to pay their salaries, we now save $6 billion.
Well, you said to shut down the TSA and then to use part of the budget to just pay those employees. Would that create some other new form of welfare system?
Well, no, because they're still getting paid. They don't need welfare.
But paid through government money.
$6 billion. No, I think we need, before welfare, we need much bigger sticks. That $6 billion is going to go into a pot. And I have a plan to create almost $2 trillion by slimming the budget without sending anybody home. No one has to go on the unemployment rolls. And the TSA, we all know the TSA is incompetent. Even if they are competent, the marshals that are flying on planes now, they're the only security we need. Had we had marshals on those planes in 9/11, those planes would not have crashed. At absolute certainty. So they're doing nothing. But no, what's going to welfare? Here's what it has to go into first. We are at war with China. At war. You can believe it or not, but they have attacked Homeland Security, the Office of Program Management, the FBI, and the Department of the Army. What did it do with the Office of Program Management? It stole 15 million records of U.S. government employees for the past 35 years. Everyone who had a top secret security clearance, for example, and many of those are secret agents, has been revealed. Now, the government has not even told us what happened to those agents. Some of them have families here in America. Their wives don't even know. Have they been killed? Are they being tortured? Something's happening to them. This is the biggest coup of warfare ever in the history of warfare, carried out by China against us. So, no, the first order of business is to get us a defense system, else we will be destroyed by these bigger nations. And I have a plan for bringing us into the cyber world with cyber security and cyber offensive systems. No, the welfare systems will have to stay as they are for a while.
Would you eventually slowly close down the welfare systems as the economy improved and as jobs were created?
Well, I mean, if everybody had a job, there wouldn't be any need for job assistance, would there?
So I want to ask you a couple last questions here. So for the American public, one of the other candidates is Rand Paul, somebody I wanted to ask you about, but we don't necessarily need to get into that. What I want to get into, though, is that Rand Paul has attempted to carry a legacy that was created by his father, Ron Paul, and even before that, other thinkers in the libertarian freedom movement, whatever you want to refer to it. And in 2008 and 2012, there was this huge movement of younger people, older people, all generations coming together to really support these ideas of limited government, shrinking the government down, non-intervention, ending the wars, things like that. And that momentum has carried on. Many of those same people, though, who were ready to vote for Ron Paul in 2008 and 2012 are not supporting Rand Paul. They're not even interested in politics anymore. They're not interested in playing the presidential game and have come to the point, they look at voting machines being hacked. They look at the level of corporate influence, and then they also just look at the candidates that are out there and don't really see like anybody represents them. What do you say to those people who have left, have no faith left in the system, and honestly, even if they support you, aren't sure how you as an outsider would even be able to get into this system?
I think only an outsider can fix the system. An insider is constrained by the machine, by the Democratic machine or the Republican machine, through which we all know you are limited. Even if you're president, you are limited in your powers by that machine. And if you see something that must be done, and it interferes with some other special interest groups, it will not be done, which is why I'm running as an independent, and it's the only way to save this country.
Have we gotten to the point where the machine is too strong to let an independent, an outsider in?
Well, absolutely, if you go about it the correct way. I'm doing the first electronic campaign. We're having an app developed that'll come out in 2 weeks. That will, if you haven't registered to vote, it will tell you how to register, and we will register for you in those states that take electronic registrations. In addition, every candidate, we've got to deal with most of them now, will give us a 500-character, kind of like a tweet, every morning. We will tweet all the candidates' tweets to our application. Notification will come up, and the user, rather than having to dig through everybody's Facebook and Twitter and all the news to find out what's going on, we give you the recap every morning for those people who are truly interested in politics and following their candidate. We have a whole host of other apps coming. We will be having fireside chats. I just went out to TechCrunch, got to deal with 3 extraordinarily creative companies to provide the software for me to sit down, talk to all of America, and have a parser parse their responses, so that if 15,000 people ask the same questions 15,000 times, the parser will be able to tell me that and tell me what the real question is.
Sounds like
I'll answer it.
You've got some new apps and new announcements coming. You mentioned several times that you have announcements for your various plans, whether it's the economy or war. Do you have a website launched for where people can keep up with your campaign?
We don't have any apps on it yet, but the website is McAfee16.com.
And the final question I wanted to ask you deals more with morality of government itself. And I wanted to get a feel for where you're at. Obviously, you believe in running for president, and you think that this is a worthy effort. And as you said, this can't be done with anybody that's within this machine. And I really respect that, because I agree. What do you say to those, though, who think the idea of government itself, or a president, a leader over other individuals who didn't choose them, also sometimes known as democracy, that's an immoral act, that's an unjust act, that's invading on other people's freedom? That idea, and also the idea of taxation being theft.
Okay. Let me answer your first question first. Are governments immoral, or what happens with governments? Here's what happens with governments. Governments are composed of people, always. And people are imperfect. we have fear, anger, jealousy, greed, hope, dreams, every host of feelings manifest in the person. Governments are made up of people, and they manifest and take on all human characteristics. They would have to. There's no way to avoid it. For example, when people get angry, generally a clash of some kind will occur and someone may get hurt. Scratched on the face or even a broken arm in a bad case. When governments get angry, entire civilizations disappear. This is a fact. When governments get greedy, when people get greedy, we stop inviting them to dinner. When governments get greedy, starvation afflicts much of the world. When governments, for any reason, become paranoid and act crazy, when it happens in people, we just ignore them. We walk away from them. But when governments become paranoid and turn inward and begin to suspect the people as being the problem, then the people have nowhere to go. This is the tragedy. And our government has become paranoid. It asks me, for example, to allow it to monitor me, that's everybody this, to spy into my life, find out all of my dirtiest details, so that it can assure me and give me promises that I am not the enemy that it is trying to protect me from. Please, see the insanity of this. But that is where we stand.
What about those who say that, because I agree with you, like you said, people, if you steal, you get locked up. If you kill, then you get locked up. Governments, though, they are immune to these, to the law, essentially. They have a monopoly on force and violence. And it's apparent when you really start to examine the way the world works and also the history of states and of governments. It seems very apparent that governments have been largely responsible, as you said, for starvation, for wars, for deaths that, depending on who the victor is, could be seen in a positive light or a negative light. So that's why I'm curious as to if you believe, though, knowing what you just said, that all it will take is one good person, because I do think governments are made up of people. People are fallible, and so to me, that's why I tend to feel like the least government we can have is the best. And essentially all we really need is self-governance and individuals who are capable of governing themselves and taking care of themselves, coming together and still organizing, but without any sort of central overarching authority. I think that's a really important point because, as you just said, historically, once that person is in power and once those bureaucracies are in place, they're not very easy to remove, and they also are capable of really horrible acts. So what would stop you from becoming that same evil?
Well, I don't know. They do say that absolute power corrupts absolutely. And maybe I would fall for that. But I'm not seeking power under any stretch of the imagination. When this country was first formed, the presidency and Congress was a seat of service. If you wanted to serve somebody, that's what you would do. George Washington didn't want it. He had already been the commander of the Continental Army. He'd had more power than you could ever give a man, and he just said, "I don't want to go. I don't want to do it. It's too hard." And so the first few presidents were reluctant presidents because it was a hard job with very few rewards, and you had no power whatsoever. Now look at what has happened. The presidency of the United States is called the seat of power. That's fucked up. It's evil, and it has to come back to service, pure and simple service.
Yeah, I just don't know if I think that we can go back in that direction, or if this, I tend to feel like we need something fresh and new, and that's why I do appreciate what you're offering, because for those who are still going to the ballot box and looking for change and who want something different, and not just something different, but something different that makes sense, I honestly can't say that I disagreed with much of what you said today, and I do appreciate your time. I hope.
But you, as Americans, see, I think the American citizens wise up long before the government because
Yeah.
they don't have that power. And you, as American citizens, can see it. I can tell it to you. I can show you photos and graphically explain it to you to the point that you say, "Whoa, I get it." And you have the power of recall. You do. It just takes work. Keep in mind, our Declaration of Independence said the following: governments are to serve. When governments stop serving this function, it is the right of the citizens to change it or even abolish it. Now, if I spoke those words on downtown San Francisco on a street corner, I would be arrested for treason. Yet, this is the Declaration of Independence. This is what we have to get back to. You, the people, get to do this. You can boot everybody out. Why don't you do it?
Thank you, John McAfee, for that. That's a brilliant idea and way to get this out there. I think you're right, though. We have the right within us. We have not only within the Constitution, but just within our own internal innate power as human beings. We have the ability to abolish all those institutions that are limiting and infringing upon our freedoms. And I hope more people will decide to take up that cause. And if you choose to do that through the ballot box, please do consider looking into the Cyber Party and checking out another candidate that is entering the race for 2016. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you.
The whole premise was based on the idea that I say that I was recruited by the NSA, National Security Agency, which I was, and that's the records to prove that, and they didn't contest that. They said, but the National Security Agency